Hi, I'm Mike Shearer, Executive Editor of the Columbus Dispatch and Dispatch.com. I have Shahid Meighan, one of our reporters, with me today. Welcome, Shahid.
Thank you.
This is our weekly From the Editor podcast, where we talk about our Sunday cover story in the Dispatch. And this week it involves a story that Shahid wrote about an increasing number of police car crashes involving Columbus police. So welcome, Shahid.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, so where did this idea come from in your reporting? You're our night breaking news reporter here. You cover police quite a bit because obviously that late days type stuff tends to involve police, but how did this come about?
This was just another one of those stories where I just kept noticing things that were happening. We would write like little one-off stories about it, and I think it happened enough times where I noticed like, no, like there's something more here. Like why, like I remember there was a point where like there were 2 crashes in a day, which I can't remember any other time that's happened. So I figured like, okay, this is worth digging into. I didn't really know what I was gonna find. It was just more, I was just really curious. Yeah, that's how it kind of turned out.
And good reporters are curious. That's how we ask questions. In this case, you got data, you found anecdotes and examples of what's been going on. And I guess it's not surprising that police are involved in some crashes. We have officers in the city of Columbus, many officers out every day driving 24/7, 365, often driving to emergencies when they need to get too fast. So it's not shocking that there's crashes, but what you found is they are increasing at a pretty significant rate.
Yeah, they're increasing, and a lot of a large chunk of them happening while they were responding to emergency calls, which also caught my attention. Of course, even when they're responding, they are still beholden to drive with some due regard, right?
Yeah.
They're required to do that. So the fact that this happened while they're responding to emergencies, again, it caught my attention.
Okay, but a lot of these were not emergencies, right?
Yeah, a lot of them are just regular, crashes.
Yeah.
Just driving around like any regular person would do. Yeah.
All right, so the numbers are in Shahid's story, but basically in 2024 there were 137 crashes, which is way more than 2021. They've cost taxpayers at least $550,000 last year. That does not include replacement cruiser costs, which could be significant at $68,000 a cruiser, basically. Yeah. And in the 2024 collisions, 34 cruisers were totaled. So we had 34 cruisers totaled, meaning they could not be operated anymore.
Correct.
And 13 were due to officer negligence, and 14 were involved the at-fault party didn't have insurance, so the cruiser was damaged during a pursuit. So not negligence by the officer. So that's a lot of crashes, obviously.
A lot of crashes and it's a lot of money. It's a lot of money.
Well, I think anyone who's involved in a traffic crash knows it's a nightmare dealing with it. But,
exactly.
So your story begins with a story of an officer who last November was responding to a fire to help out with probably traffic control or whatever. And it was 2:30 in the morning. Downtown's pretty quiet then. And he did not trigger his lights and sirens until he sped into the intersection of East Ridge and South 4th Streets. And less than a second after he turned them on, he was hit in a crash.
Yes.
And he was found, so what happened about that? He was found to violate a policy.
He violated policy and he was cited. Columbus police did whatever it is that they do when it comes to handling that. But that was just, thankfully, I guess in a way, it was the only most egregious one that I found, because the officer was on his phone, trying to figure out how to get to the side of this fire, which I understand. But again, to not have the lights and sirens on and then to put it on right before you get into a crash and you broadside a car that had the green light, was just very wild to me.
Yeah. Well, but that's, we had an accident outside our office here last week where someone turned in the middle of a green light, and it happens quickly, obviously. All right, so, but what you did find was that more and more officers are found to be at fault in crashes too. In 2020, basically they were not at fault, so they were cleared in 3 out of 4 crashes. And this year it was 50-50. So half these crashes that occurred, officers were ruled at fault.
50% of the time, this was last year. That's another thing that me and also Rick caught too. More crashes in more crashes in 2024, and more than were being found at fault in these crashes.
Do we have any idea why that's happening?
Columbus police couldn't really give me a reason. One theory that was kind of positive was that, of course, 2020, not a lot of people were on the road, obviously because of the pandemic. But since then, they didn't really give a reason. I'm not sure anybody knows why. It might just be part of the job. I don't know. Mayor Ginther swore by the training and driving that Columbus police do receive. They all get, the cadets all get like they're required to get a certain number of hours of driving. But yeah, there's no rhyme or, there wasn't a rhyme or reason given to me anyway.
Okay. Oh, so we did not find that. All right. So, but what we did find is that when these accidents occur, and if you're the unlucky motorist who happens to be involved, it's a nightmare, even worse than the typical traffic accident where you have to deal with insurance companies and all that. And that's because the city does not necessarily face liability the way a private citizen does.
Right. So basically, the way the attorneys explained it to me was that they would have to prove that the officer was just wanton or reckless in their driving, which is, I mean, that's in the words of the attorney that I spoke to, an impossibly high bar to meet in the eyes of the law.
Yeah.
And so when you have these regular people who get into these accidents where it's their fault, it's kind of like they're out of luck, unfortunately. Yeah,
the city attorney's office talk about how they have immunity, which, there's a reason for that in the law, but it's also, I think we want residents to be treated fairly, obviously, if they're in these situations.
Exactly.
One of the attorneys spoke to said when people get creamed by these cops, they're screwed. If police say they're an emergency room, the courts are going to give officers deference, which is, interesting. And obviously, if they are responding to a major crime, that's more understandable.
Right. But as one of the attorneys said, also he believes that there needs to be, I guess, some more like uniform definitions, like what an emergency is.
Yeah.
And of course, making sure they're following. They call them emergency vehicle operations. Is basically that when they're responding to an emergency, their lights and sirens are on, and to make sure that they're doing that if they are going to an emergency. If they're not, or if those things are not met, then it's kind of like, okay, were you actually going to an emergency or were you just driving? Yeah.
All right. So you interviewed a young person, Kelly Murtha, 25. And basically, this happened this year in 2025
yes,
in May? So this is a fairly recent case where she was driving home, and she was at Olentangy on the northwest side, and dash camera. You obtained a lot of dash camera. These are pretty scary crashes that I watched in the editing process here. But basically, she pulled into an intersection and a cruiser came through and struck her.
Well, opposite. So the officer was heading into the intersection.
Okay.
The license sign was on. Kelly even acknowledged that too, but she just didn't see or hear it.
Yeah.
But she ended up hitting the cruiser.
Okay.
Causing it to rotate in the intersection, basically.
Okay. So was she ruled at fault in this crash?
She was not. So the officers said that technically she was at fault, but didn't actually didn't formally do it because of the blind spots that are in that intersection where she didn't see or hear the sirens.
Okay.
But her dad was really frustrated with the whole thing. When he went back and watched the dash camera video, he saw that there was a person doing a ride along with the officer. And he's like, well, why was it ride along with him to begin with? And then another issue that he had an issue with was that the officer was on his way to a car crash that was about 4 miles away. He wasn't the primary officer dispatch. He volunteered to go.
Yeah.
He had no reason to go. So it's like...
And it was 9 minutes after the crash was reported when this happened.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. He realized that... Now, granted, he had initially heard that there were injuries reported out of this crash, but it wasn't until after his crash he realized that there were actually no injuries. So he didn't need to be there to begin with.
Okay. So they have received no compensation from the city.
No.
And I think your story says the crash has cost her more than $20,000.
Right, 20 minutes, yeah.
That is obviously difficult for her to accept.
Right, of course. I mean, $20,000 is a lot, regardless. But if it were like the city, for example, that's like a drop in the bucket.
Yeah.
But like for the regular person, who has 20,000 just sitting around to recover from an accident. So it kind of highlights, I think, how this can affect regular people, especially when officers are involved. As I noted in the story, Columbus police do their own investigations.
Yeah.
So I'm not here to say that I'm not saying that it's that they are misrepresenting anything by doing their own investigations. I don't think that. But it does look strange from the outside. I think that's fair.
Well, the fact that half of them were found to be at fault shows that they're not playing favorites, you would think, at least.
Right, but that's a way to look at it.
Yeah.
That's a way to look at it. I think a cynic would say just 50%. There might be, you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. No, and you look at it, you take numbers, look at them any way you want to,
exactly.
I guess. But it's, if they were 100% not at fault, that would be a different story.
Absolutely. I agree.
Okay. So the thing I found in the end the most interesting about this, and your story kind of wraps up on this topic, is, is there change needed in the law to, as one personal injury attorney said to you, change is needed to level the playing field for motorists seeking compensation when they're involved in crashes with officers and first responders. For one, courts could limit the definition of emergency call and come up with a better, more uniform and objective idea of what constitutes an emergency call. So that is a interesting part of this is the public being fairly protected in these cases.
Right. There's that. I think it's fair, right? Like, why not? Like, why wouldn't you want a uniform definition of what an emergency call is?
Yeah, legally at least.
Yeah, legally, so that like we're all on the same page.
Yeah. All right. Well, so and then the other deterrent about police immunity needs to change, which obviously gets into a much more complex topic.
Much more complicated. Yeah, an interesting thing with this story was that I knew of the term qualified immunity, of course, years before, but it was only used in the context of police shootings.
Yeah.
I didn't think that, and it makes sense when I first heard it. I didn't think of it in the context of like anything else, right? Crashes or anything like that.
Well, I mean, I've covered city governments for a long time, and there's been all kinds of stories of people suing cities for the stop sign was overgrown. But once again, it comes down to whether you're completely negligent or not. And if you're running the city as best you can, you're probably going to be okay from a liability standpoint, things like that.
Right. Yeah.
So, all right. So, what was kind of your takeaway from doing all this work on this?
Oh man, I mean, I think my biggest one was that officers are always driving, right? They're always going to be out and about driving, and I guess them getting into an accident is almost inevitable, just like you or me driving. Like, it's going to happen. I think though, when you have an increase like this, it kind of warrants a bigger question, like, okay, what are they doing or not doing, and more importantly, how are people being affected? I mean, we had a 25-year-old who was just on her way to home and she got into an accident, and like she's kind of SOL because it's like they're an officer that responding to a crash, and like officers kind of have that shield, and it, like they said, it's not an even playing field. I mean, how?
Unless they're negligent.
Unless they're not, right, which again is hard to prove. It's very hard to prove.
Yeah. So in your story, the first case we talked about, you said the officer was fidgeting with his phone for navigation.
Fidgeting is a nice word. He was on his, like, I'm talking about like.
So he's driving. So he was violating that law too.
Right. Well, there is something in CPD policy saying that if they can use, I mean, they have the computers on like in their cruisers too, and they use that as well while they're driving. But it's still, of course, you need to be careful, right? In this case, I mean, it's hard to say that he was, to be honest, and we see that with the fact that he was cited. I mean, he had his GPS app on his phone, speeding through downtown Columbus, and just took out a Chevy Impala. Okay. So it was just one of the more egregious ones that I saw, where it's like, this is insane. Like,
I mean, so his car, whatever. I mean, obviously, in a town this size, every officer's not going to know where every address is.
Of course.
And so to find their way to an emergency is difficult sometimes, I suppose. Okay. All right. Well, Shahid, thank you for your efforts on the story. It's really interesting. I'm sure our readers are going to enjoy it this weekend. And thanks for joining me today.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Until next time, we will see you on From the Editor next week. Thank you.